I don't really enjoy sculpting, so I muscle through those things if I need them. And the rabbits that I did for Watership Down were sort of a necessity because I didn't have the luxury of being around rabbits like closely all the time. And even if I did, I couldn't just like 360 rotate them all the
Yeah.
time. So there were so many angles I had to be able to get that I needed to be able to set something in front of me and figure that out, the foreshortening of
Right.
something's hind quarters and its head out that way, and what you can see of the cheek or the eye, or you can't. And once I did that a few bajillion times, I didn't need those anymore. But
Just after a bajillion.
yeah,
Met a ghost of a king on the road when I first fell. Fire burning to my knees I fell. Met a ghost of a king on the road.
Welcome to SASF, our perfect acronym. Stories are our soul food. Everybody, meet Joe Sutphin. You've done many things. So there's many things. Google the guy, figure out his full bio. But most recently, this beast. This is a big book.
Yeah, and wow, all color too.
It's big.
It's incredible stuff.
I knew it was a task. When my copy arrived, I was very surprised. And I follow you on Instagram, and I've seen the process, and even I can't remember how many rabbits you said you had drawn through.
How do you know? Yeah, I mean, I think I just keep thinking like we're at like roughly 370 pages, and then anywhere from like 6 to 9 panels a page, and between 1 and a dozen rabbits per panel. So yeah, it's tens of thousands of
Tens of
rabbits.
thousands of rabbits.
Yeah.
Do you draw rabbits in your sleep?
No, the funny thing is, I am asked that
A lot?
nearly every time someone talks to me, and my answer is I actually never, to my knowledge, I cannot remember ever having art as a part of my dreams, and I'm
Wow.
okay leaving it that way.
Last night
someone asked me.
That's a big
Yes.
statement. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah. Someone asked me that at a book signing last night, and I said, I'm afraid that I get asked it so much that I'm answering it so much that it is going to end up in my dreams. So I'm just going to start finding a way to like
maybe
back
this
out of
is
this.
maybe this is the one that tipped the scales, and you're going to start dreaming rabbits now, and you can blame me forever. Your days are full of rabbits. We don't need your nights to be full of rabbits.
Right.
So let's start by talking a little bit just about Watership Down itself, the original book. Like, when did you meet the book?
Well, probably like a lot of people in the States did, turning on the TV in the middle of the day in the 80s and finding a cartoon. And so because there was a cartoon when there wasn't supposed to be a cartoon on, I watched it, and I thought it was interesting. So I think I probably caught it maybe 3 or 4 times in various pieces, the same way that I would catch The Hobbit on TV, or The Secret of Nim. And
Right.
I was allowed to watch a lot of stuff as a kid that I think led to me not being squeamish of these sorts of things. So I don't have the same memory that a lot of people popularly say they have about Watership Down. So
And what's that?
that is the kind of popular meme today of that film traumatized me, that book traumatized me.
Right.
Maybe I'm also broken because
We all just have super fond
I
memories.
just have
of
happy
Watership
feelings.
Down.
I just have like happy memories of Watership Down.
Yeah, and people say that about The Secret of Nim as well.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
I have
Also a really fun show.
It is probably the most like creatively profound thing I've experienced in my life. Like I literally can remember being like 6 or 7 years old and catching like a piece of it. And my dad said, I have to go help grandpa put some, lighting in his ceiling. And I had to stop watching it. And I can remember being at my grandparents' table and drawing Nicodemus's hand over and over from the
Wow.
opening of that film because
That's
it was
great.
just so captivating. But
And that's one where
I've heard so many people say,
sorry.
that's traumatized me. That traumatized me.
So is that art style something you aspire to? I mean, I've having read the book and then watched the film, you can see the cartoon added a real flavor to the novel. like
Mhm.
that mystical fantasy aspect that was not
Yeah.
there in the book itself. And I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
something that might have improved on the book.
I wholeheartedly agree. It's one of those few things where I feel like that was better than the book potentially. But yeah, that led to me. I don't aspire to a whole lot, I guess, as a visual artist, other than to make work that I feel good about or feel inspired by making. Um, and usually that is drawing my influence from the things around me, which is, the natural world in all of its stages of life and death and rebirth. I love drawing those stages. I love drawing beautiful, living, thriving plants as much as I love drawing completely dilapidated remnants of weeds, and the way that weeds cling and pieces of them linger for. We have ironweed out in our field, and those stalks can get like, I think we've had some that were like 11 feet tall at one point, and they're so beautiful in the summer, but that stalk stays there all the way till the next stalks come up. And sometimes the new stalks are growing right beside this old stalk. And I don't know, that stuff's fascinating to me. So
Well,
I draw a lot of influence from that.
watching that makes a lot of sense actually because I'm watching the botanical influences on your work is really interesting. Like the way that leaves vein and like there's a lot of line work in
Yeah.
plants and some of the characters that you'll throw up on Instagram. What's like a little leaf wizard, like you've got a
Yeah.
lot of cool stuff that you've done playing with that.
I
Um,
sure do.
it makes sense. And there's some of these I think I've hit you up before and said this needs to be a character or this is I hope you're doing something
Oh,
with this,
yeah,
but
sure.
you've always been very busy doing things like Watership Down.
Yeah,
Um,
Yeah.
at Watership Down, thinking back on it, it has such adult themes, right? I think if you put it that way, which is what you were referring to earlier. But the mood of the book feels, when you reduce it down to a graphic novel, it feels like your art then has to carry so much more than the simple word. Like
Everything.
like it has to
Yeah,
be
yeah.
like what you're doing on the page is actually what makes it work as.
yeah.
And again, I'm not trying to put down your
No,
co-author or anything, but it does seem
the
like the
weight
whole
of that
mood.
is yeah, the weight of that is heavy when, especially because you have a book where the prose and the narrative is actually beautifully written. So, you're gonna lose that, and so if you're gonna lose it, you have to replace it with
Yep.
backward. What was he looking at and describing? Okay, well, let me show you, as the author was telling you about it, what was he seeing? um, and that was kind of my joy in making the art in the book was, um, we don't get to say the things Richard saw. We have to show what he saw, and he saw real things. So visiting these real places and setting foot in
Yeah,
them,
the
and
the downs that you have right here,
yeah,
that sort of
Yep.
moody sunset with the rabbits and the Cotswolds feel. I don't know.
So
That's awesome.
reading the novel the first time for me, the I was pretty young. I don't know how old I was, but I want to say maybe fourth or fifth grade, probably fifth grade. Just given knowing my life story is probably the end of fifth grade. Um, it was I remember the sensation of it. I remember the impression of it. I remember just the overwhelming immersion of it. Like the fact that these rabbits are feeling intensely. Like it's deeply primal. It's not shallow and trite, and so we're doing something with bunny rabbits to make
yeah,
it shallow and trite. It was profound and deep and shockingly immersive. Like
yeah,
really shockingly immersive. Uh, I was really surprised at the size of your book. Like I was like, wow. Like first just in publishing, I was surprised that they went for that.
It's ambitious.
That the
yeah,
publisher, not so much that you, but that the publisher said, "Yeah, we're willing to do this big. We're
yeah.
willing to go big on this." Was that a conversation? Did what?
Um, I feel like, if I can remember it well, they had sort of a page count that they wanted to shoot for from the start, and I feel
Okay,
like it was like in the 350 mark.
okay. So they
Um,
knew it would be not small.
yeah, and I feel like James also had already, put together some factors of what he felt the page count was going to require. And James is, I mean, he's been making comics since I was a kid.
Yeah.
He is just one of the like real OGs of the comic world, constant student of comics, cartooning, and he's co-founder for the Center for Cartoon Studies in Vermont, which is a physical school where he teaches. He's won multiple Eisner Awards. So uh, he already had, and he, like most of us, a lot of us, is just a massive Watership Down fan. So both of us went into this being lovers of this thing and this story, and I was just lucky enough to have that person to be my guide through doing this. And the book actually got bigger in very late stages because we had to make some revisions and add some things in. So there was at least one entire chapter that got added sometime like about a year and a half ago, year ago. Like we were like 75% done with the book and added like another chapter and multiple pages here and there. And um,
Wow.
so yeah, I think
Is
that
that
more than anything,
sorry, was that
yeah, go
to
ahead.
why did you need to do that? Is that because it was an editorial process, or were you finding it was tough to get certain parts
Mm.
to deliver what they needed to? I mean, it just did.
Yeah, I think to a large degree it is that on something this vast, you're getting it approved in batches. So in
Yeah.
this book is in 4 parts, so we're like approving 4 parts, and then we're working through it. And then the farther you get into it, the more you start to look at it and wonder, okay, does this all flow the way that we
Yeah.
thought it did
Yeah.
when we approved it in parts? And Richard's daughters started to notice that um, there was something being lost by us kind of skipping Hazel's first kind of reconnaissance type of mission into Nuthanger Farm without his team knowing that he was doing it to check on these hutch rabbits and learn about them. We had skipped that, and in the essence of like time and space in the book, we went straight to the whole group of them going into Nuthanger and doing their raid. Um, and uh, the daughters both felt that there were certain rabbits, and even in the hutches, that weren't given much agency by this happening. It felt almost like an abduction rather than like a, hey, there's something better
Yeah.
than what you guys have. I could take you and we can have something better for you. Instead, it just became like a, hey, we're here, we're cutting the door open, get out and let's go. And it was tough to make that decision, but once we did it, it turned out to be one of my favorite like visual chapters because we ended up with just this beautiful, like the sun's not up yet, and there's just this undercover mission, and there's the danger that there's the cat that's kind of watching what's happening, and the lookout guy is not the bravest guy, it's this little pipkin. And so it was a fun and beautiful chapter, so I was glad that we did that. There were some instances where we had to kind of take multiple characters, and maybe there were different things being said and we had to kind of reappropriate those to a character that fit better into the moment. um, so there were times where maybe Roz or Juliet might say, we really would rather that you leave this with Blackberry or that you leave this with Dandelion. And so it just required some trickery of going in and Photoshop and like digitally drawing the faces different on some rabbits or things like that, or even patching in rabbits that I drew on paper, scanned in and patched them in to kind of fix. So there was some shuffling of panels here and there, but I'm really happy with the end result. And yeah, it is great if the publisher is like, yeah, we want this to be the best book possible. So if we have to add entire signatures, then we'll do it. So
Yeah. Well, they did. This is a beefy one.
yeah.
It's like we're at like 380 somewhere in there,
Yeah,
right?
and I don't know how much of that is comics, maybe like 365, 370 is comics,
Which is
maybe.
still a lot.
Maybe more. Maybe it's like 375. I don't know what it is, but
I say this as somebody like to whom publishers have said, can you adapt this into 240 pages? Like we want to do a
yeah.
graphic novel, but we need it 240. 240 is that
Yeah.
that number. Um,
Yeah.
when you recommend Watership Down to people who've never read it, like the original novel, what do you see your book as a gateway to that, or do you? I know some people will meet it through you for sure, the way you
Mm.
met it through a show. What do you say about Watership Down? What makes Watership Down
Mm.
a great meal? What makes it good soul
Yeah.
food?
Yeah. And honestly, because I get asked this a lot, especially pertaining to my book, I don't know if I'm the best salesman, but I do like to encourage people to read the novel first because I feel like there's just so much beautiful writing
Yeah,
that you don't get in our version, and I feel like you will appreciate the story better because Richard takes so much time to explain the strangeness that you're not
yeah.
if you're just jumping into the graphic. If when I started looking at which I don't really do much at all, but when I looked at some early reviews like on Goodreads, any and all negative reviews started with I've never read the original book, but so and for that I feel like I'm not even going to bother reading the rest of this review. So
Yeah, you could be like,
um
I've never read your review either.
yeah. um for me, like, I think that why Watership Down, it had its 50th anniversary last year. And I think that why it is lasted is that there's so much of everyone, there are so many pieces of everyone's life in this. I feel like with such a large cast of characters, you everybody finds something about themselves in it. Um, uh, and the scenarios that they find themselves in and the difficult decisions that they have to make, or some really severe like internal team struggles that they have of people, characters really not believing that other characters are making the right decisions. And there's just a lot of I think it's just like I said, it's just easy to find things that you relate to in it. And at the same time, for me as a Christian, um, I can't help but see just really beautiful parallels to things that I find true and things that I find beautiful. And I know that Richard was very clear in his life to say it's just a book about rabbits. But I've had that discussion with his daughter Juliet, who I have a really, really great relationship with. That while I do respect that he had that sentiment, um, I think that if anything, it just kind of gave him the ability to step back and allow people to say what they're going to say, and he doesn't have to endorse it, which I think is fine. And I think that uh, it's not a bad thing that so many different types of people from different backgrounds have found a specific meaning in Watership Down that is not what Richard meant. Um, I've been asked some very pointed and almost strange questions about does the book still carry this specific theme that it carried back then? And I would say, well, if that's what you went into it with, then it will, because we followed the book, but it did not carry that theme intentionally. Um,
It's really interesting. We've talked a lot about how animal characters allow you to introduce adult themes to children in a way that is much allows them to handle themes like loss, isolation. I mean, even population control in this book, bullying. These are the kinds of things. That's a whole generation of people who are going to meet Watership Down through this first. Like my kids are getting it for Christmas, and
yeah,
they're going to meet all these rabbits, and they're going to love them. And I think it's going to set them up for that the opening
yeah,
moodiness of Richard Adams' prose. At least I hope so. We'll
yeah,
find
Yeah,
out, I guess.
yeah. So, like, we're officially going against your recommendation, your advice.
yeah.
His kids are going to meet
They're gonna,
the
11 down to 2 is gonna meet it on your art.
it is really interesting to me
Nice.
that you have had so many people say that it traumatized them. And I've heard that before as well. I've heard that about Secret of Nim also, but I've heard that about my own books as well.
Mhm.
Empire of Bones, especially.
And there's
Do you know what's strange though is I feel like nobody is out there saying that about uh the Hunger Games or Maze Runner where children are murdering each other. Like
Yeah,
nobody's saying it about those.
it's weird. It's weird. I think a big part of it is that if you make death matter, if you have real stakes and you have
Yep.
it's really fraught, and it's fraught with all the true stakes that come in those situations, and
Yeah.
typologically and everything else. If it has all the layers and it stacks up, then you get that response. But I also think I haven't had a ton of people say that of Watership Down and be negative about it.
Mm.
I've had people say it and mean that it marked them, that it really, like,
Hmm.
they can still feel it. You know, it's there. They call it traumatized. I once was kicked out of a school on a book tour because a girl had had a nightmare the night before.
Oh man.
Like, so she'd had a nightmare about some fourth grader had a nightmare about 100 cupboards. I'm on a book tour. I arrive. The principal meets me as I'm in the auditorium and says, "We're canceling your event because your book is
Ah,
your book is too traumatic. We've told the kids there's no assembly." And I was standing there like, "What on earth?" And then in overly staged and very overly staged movie way, the actual offending girl with the nightmare, stepped into the hall as I was leaving out of her classroom, had the book, saw me, and sprinted at a dead run holding the book, and just came up with, like, just so effusive and like, "I love this so much. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it." I like just jumping up and down.
wow,
And the
it's
principal was
absurd.
there and
Yeah.
like, "This is the one we're canceling the whole thing for." Like, she's like, and so they pivoted and said, "Well, you can talk to the kids, but we're not going to allow you to sell the book." And I was like, "Great, sure, okay. I'll talk to the kids. I'm not here to. You don't sell a ton at a school anyway." But that kind of, like, she said to everybody, "I had a nightmare and it traumatized me," but her reaction to it was profound affection, like a really deep affection. She felt it deeply. I've had a
Yeah.
lot of that with Watership Down, with people who are negative about it. I've heard people who are just poo poo. "I don't want to spend that much time with rabbits," but
Yeah.
very few people have said it's traumatic. Like, I felt it really deeply and didn't also have affection for it. I think it's a
I
profoundly
wonder,
healthy
yeah.
book.
I'd love to have more of those conversations fleshed out and to hear if that's where people would land. Um, because I try to encourage people that there is nothing violent in Watership Down that didn't cost something, that didn't mean something, that wasn't like there's no end goal in Watership Down that wasn't worthy of losing your
Yeah.
life.
That's a good
The
way of putting it.
characters, yeah, the
Yeah.
even as I was making the book, there were moments where, I'm with these characters for 4.5 years, and when hard things happened, I felt like I was putting them through it. Like,
Yeah.
I felt responsible all of a sudden, that like it had to mean something. Like there were no moments where some character just, went through something for no reason at all.
Right.
And
I think what people say, the one I remember vividly, read it in sixth grade, I think, was that first false hope of the farm where the farmer feeds the rabbits and keeps them safe from predators, and then
yeah,
Bigwig getting snared. And that
yeah,
that pivot from false hope to actual despair, with Fiverr still being the agent, that's a fantastic community picture that was.
yeah,
I do think it's formative because it's like that.
yeah.
It's so accurate how that worked out.
Well,
Where
and that
yeah,
chapter has so many layers about society. It's so deep. That you've got all the way the surface where you go into this gigantic warren that doesn't have nearly enough rabbits for the size of it. It's like a big skeleton, like a rib cage. They
Yeah.
kind of just define it as, and they have they have done everything they could to say we have it good, everybody just stick with the plan and have it good with us. And so anything that goes outside of the realm of like just exist, just fall into line, and we get really great food for all of this, you're not allowed to talk about anybody that has gone before you. We don't mention anybody else. They had they had history. You could go to, I don't know, remember, it was sort of like a well. There's like the remnants of a well, and they had the laburnum there. They had the shape where a rabbit had been drawing and creating, culture. And they're like, it's just this thing. We don't really
Yeah.
care about it. And even they want to, is there a storyteller? Can we tell a story? And, you know, they're like, oh yeah, Dandelion, tell the one about Ella Ray Raw and whatever. And they're kind of like, we don't really tell those quaint little stories about, the creator of the world and, the
We
Prince
don't. We're
Rabbit. We're kind of,
sophisticated now. We moved on.
yeah, it
Yeah.
became very, whatever the rabbit word for humanist is, they just become very much like, we'll have this weird character, Silverweed, tell you this really strange, enigmatic tale that just creeps you all out. And but yeah, it's like, it's a fascinating to see, how much society can be like that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I have never hesitated to recommend Watership Down to anybody. And when I've had people resist, or usually parents resist, it's just like, no, like let it happen. If you're willing to have your kids read the Bible, which you absolutely should be, Watership Down is nothing. I mean, it's like
No.
it's nothing to what those characters are going through and the violence and all the story. I think Watership Down's pretty fantastic. I mean, it really is a fantastic book. And one of the things that I don't know if this is just arbitrary or just personal, or coming from my own childhood, but when a book is really great, it has a kind of permanence to it. It feels permanent. I mean, I read this pretty young, and the book actually hadn't been around that long.
Yeah.
Like it was not brand new. I was reading it, but I was reading it fairly early in its life cycle. And when I read it, it felt ancient. It felt like this story that had always been there. This is this
Hmm.
really old story, and it was not. Now it's starting to be older, like we've moved to 50
Yeah.
years and so on. And when I hand it to one of my kids and my kids have read it, it has the exact same impression on them. It feels like this permanent thing, like this story that's always been there, which is, I think, a book that can be a classic young, where it feels old, it feels classic when it's new. It doesn't trend out. Like it wasn't trendy when he wrote it. It's
Yeah.
not trendy now. Like it's just
Yeah.
a pretty profound thing. And the iteration you've done to it, I love the scope you've pursued. I love the patience you've had as you've done it. You said 4.5 years pursuing this thing. I love that you've not been too reductive. You've actually kind of scaled up. And if people don't want to look at 38,000 rabbits, this isn't the book for them. But if they don't want to read about
Yeah.
rabbits, the original's not for them either. This is
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, I think looking back in hindsight, Hazel's such a great character. I think so many authors trying to write will create that kid who wants to be in the Ausla. He wants to be part of the military, but it takes him so long to get going. But with Hazel, he has to start leading that group from whatever that is, the first 40
Yeah.
pages. He's out making decisions. He has to, he gets to look at different leaders across multiple different rabbit warrens. He has his leader who's the sleepy don't do anything. There's the despotic one. There's multiple other leaders all the way through the thing, even from his own group. So I just love the energy and
Mhm.
activity that Hazel has as a main character. It's kind of impressive that that he was able to do that with a rabbit. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
this rabbit is a great protagonist.
Yeah, for sure.
It
Have,
is.
have you you said you've been really happy with the end result. I think you should be. It's extremely impressive. The fact that you did this kind of parallel to Little Pilgrim's Progress, which I wish I'd brought my copy of that too, which is also
We also gave
massive.
to Christmas last year, I
Yeah.
think. Or was
Yeah.
it the year before?
Yeah, it's sort of
Oh, there you go.
and Little Pilgrim's Progress. It's funny because this is a book, the novel that I did laps through. I mean, I did laps through when I was little, as did my sisters. And you produced a very fat, massive volume for that. And now you followed it up with pretty shortly on the heels of it, another massive volume.
Yeah.
When are you going to do something cheap and trite?
Ew. I don't know.
I mean, do you have
Is
another tome?
bagging
Is there
groceries
another?
cheap in Troy?
Is there another big tome? You know, coming? Like,
Well,
what's next?
I am actually making Christmas Carol in right
Okay.
now in the same visual world of Little Pilgrim's Progress. So
Wow.
it will be a shelf mate to that. Obviously, it's not as big as thick as Little Pilgrim, but um, that door has been left open by Moody for me to continue to explore uh, what that world of bookmaking can look like. It doesn't have they don't have to relate. The characters don't have to relate. It's just a world that comes really natural to me that I don't really have to think very hard on what comes out. So it's an easy world for me to work within. Um, and
Well,
Kevin
can I?
Chandler, my buddy
Oh, go for
Kevin,
it.
and I have a Little Pilgrim early reader spinoff that we're
Okay.
making as well right now. So,
Nice.
Can I ask what animal character Scrooge is?
well, I stuck with kind of the
McDuck.
old hair.
Obviously, McDuck.
Yes,
Scrooge
it
McDuck.
was.
You went with an old
Be-
hair. You went with a rabbit.
yeah, yeah, because uh, again, like sometimes when you're working anthropomorphically with animals, uh, you need to do what is easily digestible. I don't want to throw somebody for a loop. If it was like it's a platypus on the cover, and then people are just like, "Wait, what is this?" Like I don't want someone as much as my mind is like, I got to do something different. Um, it's like you can't reinvent the wheel. Like I drew him as a hare, and I thought it just actually can't be any more right than that for me.
Mm.
So Bob Cratchit is a chipmunk, and that worked really well visually. And that's about as exotic of an animal as I probably get. But yeah, I think to me, I just kind of stick with if this was a North American tale, fable, folk tale, what would it be?
Yeah.
So I just kind of stick with what animals can I
Right.
readily bump into in my backyard for the most part.
Is one of the ghosts a coyote?
No, I have one is a rabbit because Christmas past needed to represent the youth and the
Yeah.
beautiful
Yeah.
life that Scrooge lived as a kid. And I went with a lion for Christmas present because in Little Pilgrim, the lion is the prince. And so, I wanted that present Christmas to represent, that prince and that coming king. And then future, I did toy with some ideas like coyotes and things, but I realized how incorrect that was because it just didn't it evoked fear and terror. And when I thought on what an angel of death or a grim reaper would be, they don't ever they're never the cause of why they're there. They never come to you and end your life. They come to you to show you this is your outcome. I'm just guiding you to it now. We have to go. And in the same way, when you drive past some turkey buzzards on the side of the road with some roadkill, they never killed that thing. They're only there at the
Yeah.
end of that thing's life. And so I did end up going with a very stoic turkey vulture with a
Oh,
cloak over it
that's
with
good.
I like
Nice.
its
it.
That's
eyes are
good.
not visible, just the beak, and
Oh, fun.
busted old ornaments are kind of hanging off of its cloak. And I had to do some rewriting in the text so that there weren't a hand. There's always the mention of a hand, so I had to kind of finger like
Yeah.
feathers and things like that. I had to kind of get a little more descriptive, but it takes a while to figure it all out. But
Yeah.
I get really deep into things have to make sense to me. So
Right. I mean, obviously, if they don't make sense to you, there's no chance for the reader.
Yeah.
Like it
yeah,
has to resonate with you.
I,
Oh,
d-
yeah.
I had a question about do you normally do molds? So I saw you'd whittled a bunch of your different characters, which was very cool. I
mm,
liked seeing the pictures of all the different rabbits that you'd whittled.
yeah.
Do you often do molds or maquettes?
No, I don't. Because I don't really enjoy sculpting, so I muscle through those things if I need them. And the rabbits that I did for Watership Down were sort of a necessity because I didn't have the luxury of being around rabbits like closely all the time. And even if I did, I couldn't just like 360 rotate them all the
Yeah.
time. So there were so many angles I had to be able to get that I needed to be able to set something in front of me and figure that out, the foreshortening of
Right.
something's hind quarters and its head out that way, and what you can see of the cheek or the eye, or you can't. And once I did that a few bajillion times, I didn't need those anymore. But
Just after a bajillion.
Yeah.
yeah,
Um, well, one of my goals for having you on is I just wanted to make sure that everybody who listens to this podcast was familiar with you, that you got on their radar as a creator, as somebody I really enjoy following you on Insta and watching your work. And then as you put out these massive landmark, I mean, like really landmark books, like big ones, Little Pilgrim's Progress and Watership Down. If anybody doesn't have those, Christmas is coming.
Yep.
So if you don't have those in your household, do it.
Yeah, I
They're
mean,
great for reluctant readers, and I love the fact that it's not a cheap and patronizing thing. Like comics, and which I adore, and Tintin was my first gateway ever in to how cool that medium could be. That and Calvin and Hobbes, but they don't have to be patronizing. Like you don't have to hand somebody a graphic novel and have it be a patronizing, easy, quick, cheap snack as opposed to the real meal. These are the both books you just released, Little Pilgrim's Progress, Back a Ways, and then this one. It's a task. It's a hefty undertaking to sit down and read. And I love that. I love that it's a challenge. I love that it sets a road in front of a kid. It sets a road in front of a reader and says, like, it's the work's on you. Like you're gonna read it. You're gonna go through and you're gonna experience the whole thing. And it's not a pat on the head. So anybody who's not familiar with you, Joe Sutphen, should check you out online. Get Watership Down for sure. If you haven't read the original, read the original too. Get this one and Little Pilgrim's Progress.
Because Joe's renowned for that. Your pen and ink, especially, is where I first I just saw, wow, this is a flavor, and you get everything you want out of a full painting, but pen and ink, and just I mean, I've seen your spot illustrations and a number. The pigeon book you did, also of course your spots in Wing Feather. You know your art there, and then of course these ones, and getting to see you play with color so much was fun because I'd mostly just seen your pen and ink.
I would like to mention that cover there was painted by me, and maybe I don't know, less than a quarter of the pages in the book were painted entirely by me.
Mhm.
The rest of the interior of that book, we hired my buddy Joe Hawks, who
Okay.
I saw a lot of myself in, and I was able to just on the fly train him to be me. So if you look through that book, you'll never be able to tell which pages he had a hand in and
Yeah.
which I did. And we just kind of worked in tandem on, I was feeding him all the information on what to color what and time of day, position of sun, whatever. But he was, man, just a total pro to work with as a
That's
colorist.
great. It is. It's also funny. That's a great reminder of 4.5 years. You were on this for 4.5 years. Adams was not on this for 4.5 years when he was writing. Like it's the undertaking of a graphic novel is it's like a little iteration between a novel and a TV show. It takes a team. And so a lot of people do assume, oh, you did it all. It's like, no, there's another name on here. There's colorists. There's people working for the publisher who are working on a layout. There's a ton of people that have to work on these things. It is a team venture. Forrest, who I think you know Forrest Dickinson or have met him, or at least
we know each other just a bit.
yeah. Who did blah blah for us? Like he worked as a colorist in the Amulet series. You know, it's like there's a lot of people who cut their teeth coming up through those ranks doing that kind of work. So yeah, this is as Herculean as this is, and as you did the heavy lift. There's helper elves. There's people that also make a living doing other pieces as they try to break in. but it's also part of why graphic novels are so expensive to do. It's
Yeah.
so expensive to do because it hits the public, hits the market, and people expect it to have the same kind of cover price. But it's
Yeah.
a pretty significant team. Have sales been good on Watership and in the actual launch?
Yeah.
Is the publisher happy?
So far as I know, but a lot of that was due to our publicist, Maya Bradford. She was amazing. She got us so many opportunities. Uh, and then we had the opportunity to do the full page comic in the New York Times. So
Yeah.
instead of an advertisement, we were able to make a comic. And then we did.
That was
I
a
don't know,
brilliant idea, by the way. That was brilliant.
that was all James, actually. He made that happen, which was wonderful. We had the NPR interview was huge. I saw Amazon rankings really spike at that point.
Oh yeah.
I feel like the book kind of peaked at like 140 something, which is great.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I
Yeah.
think it's a bit, obviously at 50 years, it's an evergreen story. So hopefully it just continues to
Yeah, it'll live and
find
live.
people.
I think it measures up. I think it does measure up to what it's trying to do, which is amplify and expand on and push the original into
Yeah,
this new
right.
iteration.
We talk a lot on the podcast about adapting, and the responsibility you have when you adapt a great piece of IP. So it's interesting to me. I haven't had time to read the whole thing yet, but I am curious. It seems like you and James had that top of mind. When we've picked on Lord of the Rings adaptations, that's something.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear if you have any more thoughts on how that
We had to
adaptation
do
process went.
we had to do some hard things. Uh, there were little things that are not little to like the raving fans. Um, we took There were moments with like rabbits, like Speedwell and Acorn, who are kind of mentioned as rank and file. We had to be able to try and narrow things down because it's a lot to track. So they just became Acorn. And so there are people who have already complained Speedwell's not in this book. His lines are still in the book. Uh, Silverweed didn't make the cut. It's disappointing, but we didn't have the space telling a story, and a rabbit telling a story within a story that takes space. So because you can break down and kind of do stuff to condense the story that is a story, but when you have a story within a story, you really kind of need to tell it. And he ended up getting nixed. So some of those things
Yeah.
were sad. And there are plenty of other like little things that we had to kind of mash some things together. But in some instances, the final chapter, like the final, like, I don't know, 15 pages of this book, James just wrote the most beautiful piece out of what was like 4 chapters that Richard wrote. And we didn't have the space to do all of that. And he was able to take the entire uh, conclusion of Watership Down, which really was a stretch of chapters, and make this really beautiful little cinematic piece where you have Dandelion telling the children a story about what happened back then, and then also telling about how Hazel's journey resolved, and then that gets passed off to the present time where you're with Hazel. And it was just it's just such a beautiful little handoff that feels like great storytelling, and it's not exactly how Richard told it, but it captures everything that was good about. And that's the thing, if you go into an adaptation, I hope that you loved the original work. Because if you did, then again, those losses will hurt. And at least I can tell people, if you're upset that this didn't make it into the book, so am I. I'm not laughing in your face about it.
Yeah.
And so
It would have been great for this to be
nothing was
750 pages.
yeah.
Another 5
Yeah,
years of your life.
Yeah, why not? We can just keep spreading those 3 deliverable dates out, and I'll just live
just
on
farther and farther and
who
farther.
knows what live on
Yeah,
pretzels.
exactly. Yeah.
And then the last thing, or not last thing, but another thing, we regularly, Nate likes to say that sci-fi is fantasy, and it seldom seems clearer than when you're watching Richard Adams move seamlessly from sci-fi into this excellent, real sort of animal fantasy.
Yeah,
And you know, someone who's known for writing books about 50-foot bears or whatever from
yeah,
in space, and then moving over into such a, it's got multiple levels of myth and storytelling, a created religion, you know,
Yeah.
created casts. It's if we ever
yeah.
needed more proof that sci-fi is fantasy, I think this is it.
So
Yeah.
at least it takes the same skill set for sure.
Right.
The thing I like the most about your art, your artistic style, is one of the things I talk to writers about a lot in trying to coach young writers is to write to the senses, right? Activate all five senses, and it's easier in prose than in the visual arts because visually you only are accessing the eyeballs, but I would say that like the anti-abstract way in which you draw and which you illustrate is very earthy. You have a very earthy tone when
Mhm.
you're doing pen and ink. It's your style is the kind that comes with the smell of moss. You know, it's like it's sort of you can kind of you can smell the place. You can feel the temperature. Like there's a tactile nature to it all.
Yeah.
And so I really love your artistic voice, even when you're just messing with one little character. It's not even part of a story, and I think it really suits a book like this as something
Yeah.
that's going to get down in the mud and the hills and the warren
Yeah.
and you don't have the ability to describe the smell of the earth. You can't
Yeah.
get into that. You have to evoke that. It's like and
Yeah.
I do think your artistic voice is really evocative of
Yeah.
all the
I
senses.
appreciate that.
But it's one of the reasons why I love,
Yeah.
especially just even your stripped down minimalist inks when you're doing those.
Yeah.
It all is evocative
Yeah.
of a
You
whole
know,
experience.
one of the funny things that my wife Gina, she always gets a good kick out of. I just have this. It's kind of second nature that I'm always throwing gnats into all of my drawings. There's just gnats everywhere,
Yeah.
and it's funny because, like, if you were a giant, you would never, like, if a giant was drawing pictures of people down on the ground and you're like, why do you keep drawing flies in their house? And you're like, well, they're always chasing flies out of their house. But I was standing on top of Watership Down and the wind was just massive, like it's just blasting us, and we're just looking out and I'm like filming and trying to get just every angle possible, and it just looks like there's just no life out here. Like it's just like blasting you wind and just grass. And my buddy Aldo, our guide, he took me like over a barbed wire fence, and we walked down the face of the down. And I decided, you know what, I'm going to get video of what it would have been like for Dandelion running up this for the first time, and how Richard describes every time he thought he got to the top, there was another rise. And so I decided to put my camera down there and go up and kind of running up with the camera, like, 10 inches off the ground. When I got home and watched it, the entire video of all the grass tops and weeds blowing, there's just gnats and flies and bees everywhere, just everywhere. And you see none of that from our eyes. It's just
Yeah.
wind blasting you and grass. But so it's like down in their world, give me
A
the
lot
fly
of bugs.
swatter.
Just a lot,
Yeah, yeah.
just a lot of bugs. I like that
Yeah.
a lot. That's fantastic.
Same thing you've made. I remember. I don't know what a cowslip looks like, but now I do. Thanks to you. When you're reading about the rabbits eating, what is it?
Oh.
Silflay? Is that? I'm trying to remember the
Yeah,
rabbit word.
souffle, yeah. Out
When-
during the day eating, yeah.
Right, and those aspects of wanting to eat like a rabbit is a bit of a weird experience, and it's something the leaves look juicy in this edition, and that felt very
That was
true.
something that, yeah, Roz and Juliet, Richard's daughters, were very emphatic about that their dad loved those details. And so we were really tasked with, I have to at least find ways to show these things in their real state as much as I can. Obviously, I had to get the book done, so I couldn't always make sure every plant was right. But the funny thing is, yeah, I live here in the States, and in my early sketches, um, Aldo, who is also a painter and a botanist, like he would look at my paintings and he would be like, "What is this? What is this thing here with three leaves? That we don't have that in the UK." Like he would point out stuff so fast, and I would be like, "Oh, I gotta get this stuff right." Like I'm just drawing the stuff in my backyard, and I had to like rethink what plants look like and what they should be, not the plants that I'm used to every day here at home.
That's yeah. That makes sense. I actually just had to open and look and see. Yeah, you have gnats everywhere. I didn't even notice that. I was looking for frames where there weren't little gnats. I love it. I love the detailing. The fact that had just gone whistled past me is a little embarrassing, I have to say. Joe, thank you so much. We really
Yeah.
appreciate having you on. I hope everybody will follow you, buy your stuff, make sure these books are in your home library for your kids. I think they're fantastic. One question, it's okay if you say no, because we'll just delete this part of the episode. If we're thinking about launching kind of like a Stories or Soul Food book plate, like if we sent you book plates to sign and we sold copies over here, it's like, would you be down for that?
Oh, sure.
Yeah,
I'll do it.
awesome. Okay, then we'll be selling how many? This can be a limited edition. We'll do like 200.
I mean, we're close right there. So we're close to Christmas. So yeah,
We'll say we're going to sell 200, and we're going to include a Stories or Soul Food signed book plate from Joe Sutphin in here,
Yeah.
in this
We'll do it.
fantastic book. And I'm really excited to see what you do next. I mean, it's known you for quite a while, courtesy of Andrew Peterson and the whole Hutchmoot world.
Yeah.
Love kind of the old vibe of what you do, and it seems like you're just like throttling down and really really launching right now with Christmas Carol. When is Christmas Carol going to release, do you expect?
And probably this time next year.
1 year out. And are
Yeah.
you it's a good time to release Christmas Carol this time of year.
Yeah.
What else do you have in the pipeline?
Well, I have the early reader that I mentioned that
Little
Kevin
Pilgrim's
Chandler and
Progress.
I are doing.
Yeah.
That's called the King's Cadets and Little Joe. That's about Christiana's little brothers who stay behind in the Land of Delight when she goes over to the Celestial City, and
Okay.
just kind of their adventures and misadventures of trying to be great knights like Greatheart. And then I'm going to be working on the Misadventures of Tumbleweed Thompson sequel.
Okay.
With my buddy Glenn McCarty and I.
Yeah.
We failed the Kickstarter, and all our good friends at Story Warren, Sam and Andrew and
Oh,
Josiah
nice.
picked it up, and so we'll be doing that. And I think they'll do a rebranded release of the first book again, which will be great. And then I'm going to be working on putting together board book editions of Little Pilgrim's Progress,
Wow.
utilizing the original art, hopefully if possible, and digitally watercoloring these, because I think you would agree that children don't see things in geometric shapes, so I don't think that they need geometric shapes in board books. So I think that it will give the younger readers in the read aloud families a way to enjoy the book that maybe they're not getting to sit in and listen to with the older kids in the house. And with the art being colorized, it'll give the older kids in the house a reason to want to see what the younger kids getting to be involved in. And so that's something that's just been in the early stages. And then, there's a lot of other, there's always stuff we don't, you never know what's going to happen with any of it. So
Fantastic.
Nice.
When do you get to take a breath after all this promotion on Watership?
Yeesh. Yeah. Gina too. We're both
Yeah.
holding our breath.
You're going to be getting
So,
away?
yeah, we'll
You
see.
and the wife going to get away a little bit?
Man, it'd
Hopefully.
be nice. We'll see.
We highly
somehow.
recommend it. Feel free to stop by if you need
Yeah, come
somewhere
to
to
Idaho.
We
if you
might-
need somewhere to hide.
We'll do a GoFundMe so we can get out of Dodge.
Yeah, perfect. Well, thank you so much, Joe. It's awesome to
thanks,
talk to
Joe.
you.
Yeah. Thank you guys.
Fantastic job. It's really, I love having things that people ask all the time, as I'm sure they ask you as well, for recommendations. And I'm always thrilled when I have such a great one. I can just promote. Joe Sutphin, people. Get on the train now. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Have a fantastic day. We'll get you those book plates and we'll get these books sold.
Awesome. Love it.
If you are a longtime listener to the Stories of Soul Food podcast, then you know that I am the proud dad of 5 boys, and only 5 boys, which means we talk a lot, my wife and I, about how to raise sons. That's what made me so excited when I heard that Canon Plus was releasing the Future Men Raising Boys to Fight Giants documentary parenting series. 5 episodes of parenting goodness from a bunch of different voices, teaching your sons how to be the heroes that our culture need. In fact, they're probably going to be more like King David than you would be comfortable with. Join canonplus.com, check out Future Men, all episodes. Episode 1, The Road to Masculinity. 2, A Call for Fathers. 3, The Boy Against Himself. 4, Boys in Sports. 5, Boys and Stories. That right there, Future Men documentary series. I wanted to share it with you in case, like me, you have a number of boys in your life who are at some point going to become future men.